I think I'll start with what I call a headnote. You've heard of footnotes, right? Well, prologue sounds a little formal, and so I'm calling this a headnote. My first experience with the Electric Universe Conference was 15 years ago. I believe the group was called Chronia then, and much smaller. Maybe 8 speakers, maybe 40 attendees. At first, the subject matter really mystified me, and the context of what the different speakers were talking about and how it intertwined was a mystery. But I was really fortunate. I sat next to the late Amy Atchison, a brilliant mind, and one of the pioneers of this group. Back then, I think it was called Chronia. It wasn't called EU then. Amy patiently answered every question that I scribbled on paper and shoved at her during the conference. And she'd whisper back and she'd write the answers. During breaks and during lunch, she'd answer more questions. Eventually, Amy became a very good friend and my mentor. It wasn't long before all those questions got patiently answered by Amy that I got it, and I was hooked. Through the years, I have come to understand the electric universe more and more, and have made many dear friends, many of whom I see out there today. I wish Amy were here today to see how the EU has grown, expanded, not only in size, but in context with the speakers. The talk I'm about to give is my way of passing on Amy's mentoring and hopefully help those of you who are new to the EU to see the big picture. There are many paths to discovering the nature of our universe. Established members of the Electric Universe, Dave Talbot, Wal Thornhill, Ev Cochran, Eduardo Cardona, have been focusing on different aspects of the nature of the world that surrounds us, and yet they have to offer interconnections, ways that interconnect in an intriguing way. Those interested in the EU who specialize in the areas of planetary history, mythology, electricity, plasma, geology, archaeology, and prehistoric man often have hypotheses that interconnect and support each other, and thus suggesting a history and a present-day understanding of our universe that is revolutionary and compelling. A fascination with the universe that surrounds us dates back to an age long before there were telescopes, space probes, or shuttle missions, when prehistoric man cast his eyes to the heavens. Pictographs of a great diversity of early cultures independently depict man's fascination with and fear of what he observed. Myths and lore tell of strange and violent events, terrifying dramas in the heavens, and catastrophic changes in the cosmic order itself. Early man built temples to the heavenly figures he worshipped as gods. The myths and pictographs of antiquity clearly show that at one time our eyes saw a vastly different sky from what astronomers view in their instruments today. As Wal Thornhill has stated, today's narrowly compartmentalized specialists have a form of tunnel vision because they are not trained to see any relevance in other fields than their own, or merely refer to observations no more than a few years old. Don Scott has observed that most astrophysicists' education stops with Einsteinian gravity and have little or no knowledge of electrical science. and thus come up with convoluted explanations for phenomena they don't understand or they call mysteries. Black holes, dark energy, string theory, and the Big Bang. At one of our EU conferences, Pierre-Marie Robitaille presented impressive fundamental scientific evidence that one of the favorite universally applied principles of astrophysics is not as generally valid as had been assumed. Kirchhoff's law of radiation, together with Max Planck's derivation of it, are often assumed to be applicable in about just any case, even when they really are not. The idea that a peak in the emissivity of characteristic from any body whatsoever will reveal the exact temperature of that object, no matter what its composition, is fatally flawed. Pierre-Marie and Stephen Crothers, an expert mathematician, have published a groundbreaking paper, The Theory of Heat Radiation Revisited. Pierre-Marie has given numerous presentations. He'll be giving another one here today, or at least during this conference, pointing out that many previously accepted research results are fatally flawed. Their work, as with so many other EU researchers, have been met by the establishment with denial, derision, or been ignored. Ev Cochran, author of the book The Many Faces of Venus, observes that the recent history of the scientific investigation of Venus reveals a vast theoretical graveyard of discarded hypotheses, false deductions, erroneous premises, shoddy observations, and wishful thinking. While many astronomers, Carl Sagan among them, expected the Venusian clouds to be composed of water, Mariner 9 found precious little water and plenty of concentrated sulfuric acid. Cochrane notes that where leading astronomers observed luxuriant Venusian vegetation in full bloom, modern space probes discovered a barren, desiccated wasteland. Indeed, if truth be known, the Mariner, Magellan, and Pioneer missions have forced astronomers to radically revise their previous assessment as to Venus's origin, nature, and geological history. Cochrane states that on virtually every major feature of the Venusian landscape and atmosphere, the astronomers' theoretical expectations have been proved wrong time and time again. Given this dismal record, there would appear to be some justification for maintaining a healthy skepticism with respect to astronomers' current best guesses as to what is possible regarding Venus's recent history, or possibly that of other planets as well. Indeed, there are good reasons for believing that other, even more radical revisions of our understanding of Venus are in order. Many traditional astronomers and mythologists dismiss early stories and drawings as the fantasies of primitive cultures, lacking an understanding of what they saw. However, comparative mythologists Dave Talbot, Ev Cochran, and Eduardo Cardona have found that there is a consistent pattern in these stories. When many different, widely separated cultures tell the same story, the probability exists that these are not mere flights of fancy, but valid observations. If astronomers today were to re-examine their assumptions about what is and is not possible in the cosmos and take a new and unbiased look at the pictures coming back from NASA's probes, as well as the images from their own telescopes, they would find strong evidence to support a view of cosmology different from the one espoused by mainstream astronomers. one that ancient man saw all too clearly. Dave Talbot notes that in earlier times, man worshipped heavenly bodies as gods. Myths proclaim we once lived in the presence of gods. Gods were visible powers, often capricious and frequently violent. The priestly astronomers of ancient Mesopotamia and elsewhere made clear that these remarkable powers were planets. If the myths surrounding these gods were to be taken seriously, they raise many questions. Why did the ancient man worship the god Saturn? The planet Saturn is very difficult for the average person, to even find in the sky today. Some mythologists postulate that there is evidence in ancient lore to connect the scarred the scarred warrior hero of legend with the god Mars. Yet the planet we know as Mars is only a tiny speck in the sky. And its deep 2,400-mile-long scar canyon, Valles Marineris, cannot be seen from Earth without a powerful telescope. Why did the ancients depict Venus as a fiery dragon with a goddess with flowing hair, when that planet is merely a bright dot in the sky today? The myths of many ancients tell of violent thunderbolts, interaction between the gods. Of course we see lightning in the earth today, but never thunderbolts that streak between planets. What could have caused these violent interactions long ago? Because of their understanding of plasma, electrified gas, that makes up 90% of our universe, Wal Thornhill and Don Scott have formulated some reasonable hypotheses as to the cause of such violent interactions of the past. Relating to the present electric sky, Scott has studied the behavior of plasma in the form of Birkeland currents. I think you've heard of that. And spoke at the last two EU conferences about their counter-rotating currents. I think you've seen that picture recently, too. That are descending on the North Pole of Saturn. Shortly after he showed diagrams of his hypotheses of these rotating Birkeland currents, shortly after, not long, a video produced by NASA appeared on the internet, clearly showing exactly what Scott had predicted. And yet his proposal of just such a thing and the reason for it has been ignored. Another hypothesis, and the reason for it that proved to be real, was Thornhill's prophecy that if a comet were to be impacted by a block of copper, as NASA announced it proposed to do, a powerful electrical discharge would occur shortly before impact. Although NASA never predicted such a possibility, this is exactly what happened. Since that event, Thornhill's explanation of the electrical discharge has either been ignored or denigrated, most likely because those in the astrophysical world have developed a collective mindset against any sort of electrical causality in the universe. An excellent resource for information about the electric universe is the website Picture of the Day, managed by the industrious EU scholar. Thunderbolts Picture of the Day, remember it and check it out. You'll get a lot of interesting information there. Prehistoric man was also fascinated by our universe, as are Scott and Thornhill today, but often what the ancient chose to depict has little bearing on what we see in the cosmos. Talbot notes that pictographs show what is commonly considered to be the sun as a huge disk with a smaller one in the center, often with rays flowing out of it. with the third darker circle superimposed in the center. Our sun looks nothing like that. In many different cultures, we see the symbol of a crescent with a star at the center. How could this be when there is no star or planet closer to Earth than our moon to form such a configuration? And most importantly, why do so many not certain I shouldn't go back a slide. And most importantly, why do so many disparate and far-flung ancient cultures, people who could never have come in contact with one another, such as the Sumerians, Egyptian, Chinese, Native Americans, Mayans, Babylonians, Australian Aboriginals, and many others, all tell the same story and draw similar pictures? If these ancient writings were based on valid observations rather than fantasy, what do they tell us? Cardona, Cochrane, and Talbot theorize that Earth formerly moved in a linear alignment of planets, which I think is the picture that's been here a little early, having no resemblance to our current solar system. As seen from Earth, several planets appeared together as a towering form in the northern sky. In its stable phase, the planets moved in collinear equilibrium. They stayed in a line as they moved through space. For observers on Earth, the result was a unified configuration in the heavens, visually dominated by a large glowing planet, one we theorize to have been Saturn, then seen without its present ring system. This highly unusual planetary assembly was centered on our North Pole. It was regarded around the world as the cosmic center, the theater of the gods. Talbot offers that this can only mean that the axis of the Earth was directed along a line running through the collinear system. When the earliest religious texts and mythological sources are permitted to speak for themselves, this is precisely the arrangement they describe. What the ancients were seeing when they depicted the sun as three concentric disks was a different alignment of planets from the one we see today. They suggest that at one time, Earth was in a different polar alignment, an alignment Talbot, Cochrane, and Cardona theorize as having been Saturn, Venus, and Mars. The large outer disk in the pictographs being Saturn, the next inner disk representing Venus, often with rays emanating from it, and the center dark or red disk being Mars. The view of a crescent with a star-like body at its center is impossible. However, if it would indeed be the scene viewed from Earth in its polar alignment, if the crescent were Saturn, somewhat illuminated by the sun, and the star-like object, Mars, superimposed upon Venus. Interdisciplinary physicist Wal Thornhill ventures that at one time, Earth may have been in the protective aura of a cool brown dwarf star, the proto-Saturn, which provided an ideal atmosphere for life on Earth. Given this configuration, Earth would have been bathed in Saturn's constant beneficent glow, with no difference between day and night, and a continual, benign, single season. This would have been the time before time that Dave Talbot theorizes was the Golden Age, the age of perfect virtue, or Garden of Eden, depicted in one way or another in all diverse myths and religions. Our early forebears portrayed celestial events through ritual, reenactment, and storytelling, bringing the original celestial personalities down to Earth to become legendary ancestors of those telling the stories. By this identification with the gods, nations the world over became the special children of the mythic creator, and the creator himself often metamorphosed into a legendary first king or god of the land. Sacred activity was enacted the world over as humans relived cosmic events on Earth. Two primal motives stand out: a nostalgia for the lost paradise of the Golden Age, and a fear of doomsday. A fear of doomsday's return, fueling collective war, sacrifice, and guilt. A group of astronomers, physicists, electrical engineers, and experts in the field of ancient mythology have begun to challenge some of the generally accepted hypotheses of the history of our solar system and conventional theories of cosmology, and agree that our solar system had a catastrophic past. A common theme in the myths and religions of many disparate cultures is of a doomsday that brought the Golden Age to an end. Could it be that a disturbance in the Saturn polar alignment was the doomsday these cultures each independently remembered? The exact cause of the eventual breakup of this polar alignment is a mystery. It may have been the result of a close pass-by of an asteroid or a comet. Perhaps an inherent instability of the alignment resulted in its natural dissolution. Whatever the cause of the breakup, we know the final result is what we see today: the placid, almost circular, well-separated orbits of our present solar system. Eduardo Cardona hypothesizes that what became known as the creation did not proceed out of nothing, but out of a pre-existing chaotic substance that was, among other things, understood as a celestial ocean circumscribing the sub-brown dwarf star that emitted the radiating light and that went down into mytho-history as day one. Many skeptics say there is no mechanism that could have circularized the widely divergent paths of the planets that were ejected from the polar configuration. Electrical engineer Don Scott points out that plasma physics shows us that planets can interact electrically if they are within each other's protective plasma sheaths, magnetospheres. Electrical repulsion that is alternately felt when the planet's sheaths intersect, and then not felt when the sheaths do not intersect, could circularize orbits relatively quickly. In addition, there is strong evidence that gravity and mass itself dependent on electrical charge. Traveling along another path to present-day understanding of our universe is Scott's suggestion that the workings of the sun's photosphere can be characterized by and better understood via a detailed study of how an electronic transistor performs its functions within an electronic circuit. Several unique phenomena observed on and above the sun's surface are relatively easily understood through the analogous behavior of Scott's transistor model of the sun. Another question that relates to the enigma of how Earth is different today from ancient times is the size of the giant dinosaurs. Given what we know about mass to muscle ratio, there is no way these huge beasts could have held up their heads, much less walked, in the gravity that we have at present. Could a different planetary arrangement and/or electrical charge on Earth have provided the decreased gravity that allowed these giants to stand up and walk? Although there are questions about the Earth's gravity at the time of the dinosaurs, it is widely acknowledged that their rapid demise was caused by a catastrophe. Somehow, our gravity and our environment have changed, probably abruptly and perhaps repeatedly. It is well known that there is a universal memory of doomsday-type catastrophes from age-old tales of floods, fearsome thunderbolts in the sky, and an age of darkness that descended upon the earth. The question is, how did these catastrophes come about? Certainly for the planets to change their alignments and gravity, cataclysms of gigantic proportions must have occurred. Islands in the Arctic that consist more of shattered bones than of earth. Ancient cities submerged in oceans. Seashell fossils found on mountaintops, and behemoths found flash frozen in the Arctic with palm fronds in their stomachs are evidence of such violent events. Arcing and scarring are strong indications of past cataclysmic events in the solar system. While Thornhill proposes that the Valles Marineris scar on Mars may well have been made by an electrical discharge, and that the Grand Canyon in Arizona, right here, could have been formed in the same manner. The origin of the Grand Canyon has long been in controversy, and geologists are presently rethinking their long-held theories in this area. Those in the EU ask, if the canyon were caused by a river, where is the delta, the debris? And why are the so-called tributaries perpendicular rather than at an angle, as is typical of river tributaries? From the air, the Grand Canyon resembles a Lichtenberg pattern, a pattern that is carved on a golf green when the pole is hit by lightning. If you look at the Grand Canyon from the air, that Lichtenberg pattern looks very much like the Grand Canyon. Thornhill points out in his work, The Electric Universe, that plasma pervades the solar system, and arcing will occur when and if charged bodies interact electrically. Makes sense to me. He proposes that it is just such arcing that has caused craters on planets and asteroids and moons and even on Earth. He postulates that pictures of craters coming back from our space probes do not show a shape consistent with either the impact or volcanic models. Almost every crater we observe is round, not elliptical, as many of them would be if the meteors were coming at an angle. They have flat bottoms, often with conical central cones. The strata of the central peaks are undisturbed, and in many so-called impact craters, their walls are terraced. Secondary craters form on the rims of primary craters. Plasma physicist Dr. C.J. Ransom has simulated such craters in his VMASAT laboratory via an electrical arc. Thornhill has demonstrated in the laboratory that such characteristics are expected with electrical arcing, but not with impacts. On some small asteroids, the craters are huge, with diameters more than the asteroid's radii. If these craters had been caused by impacts, surely the asteroids would have been destroyed. Are these craters caused by electrical arcing? The phenomenon that was interpreted as the thunderbolts that raged between the gods or planets, as described in ancient myths? A corollary to Thornhill's electric universe theory is a theory that engineer Ralph Jurgens originated concerning the mechanism that powered the sun. Following in Jurgens' path, Donald Scott contends that mainstream astronomy is attempting to ignore data that contradicts their accepted nuclear fusion model. He suggests that both the polar configuration and the electric hypotheses are strongly supported by research in the field of plasma science. Scott's carefully crafted mathematical model of Birkeland currents shows how energy in electrical form is transported across huge distance in cosmic space without being dissipated and diverted from its path. Scott was the first person to demonstrate that the magnetic field within a Birkeland current reaches outward and remains effective at far greater distances than any other known type of cosmic phenomenon. He has explained the physical rationale for why the orbital distances of the planets from the Sun correlate perfectly with certain properties of his Birkeland current model. Might the flowing hair of Venus or the fiery dragon, as that planet is depicted in many ancient myths and drawings, actually have been the glowing ions of twisting Birkeland currents, or stringy things as mainstream calls them? Perhaps petroglyphs showing ladder formations and tales of a ladder to heaven, or Jacob's ladder, might well be the sightings of Birkeland currents and plasma instabilities, such as those Tony Peratt has seen in his plasma laboratories at Los Alamos. It is interesting to note how often a planet, a sphere, is included in pictures of a Chinese dragon. Astrophotographs taken at Mount Palomar and Mount Wilson by astronomer Halton Arp have removed one of the main linchpins supporting standard modern cosmology. Astronomers traditionally assume that if an object, such as a galaxy, strongly exhibits a quality called positive redshift, then that object must be 1, receding rapidly away from us, and 2, very distant. This assumption has led astronomers to pronounce the existence of such counterintuitive notions as Big Bang, missing matter, black holes, neutron stars, dark energy, and expanding curved space. Dozens of Arp's photographs provide strong evidence that the redshift equals distance assumption is wrong. Arp theorized, based not only on his own photographs, but also on images being taken by X-ray satellites such as ROSAT, that there is an evolutionary process of galaxy birth and maturation. Young objects are born from the active nuclei of parent galaxies. These youngsters are called quasars, or BL-LAC objects. They are often ejected symmetrically from the parent galaxy along its semi-major polar axis, perpendicular to the plane of the parent. This ejection process is strongly supported by the electric plasma universe theory of Thornhill, Scott, and Peratt. The thread that connects all of these innovative researchers is they're willing to base their hypothesis on the data they observe and change these hypotheses as new data is received. Too often, scientists stop asking questions and try to adjust new incoming data to their preconceived and accepted theories. The electric universe proponents, representing a variety of disciplines, are aware of how vastly different fields that date back to the earliest of time can intertwine and discover rational new hypotheses about our universe. The most important element in the search for truth is the asking of questions. The advocates of the Saturn model polar configuration and the electric universe are asking fundamental questions based upon what they have observed on the paths of discovery they have taken, and as a result, have proposed some reasonable hypotheses. All they ask now is that they be listened to, and that the listeners open their eyes and their minds to the possibility of new paths to discovery of some very reasonable ideas. Thank you.